On this episode, we chat with tourist scam scholar Ding Xu.
So if you want to learn more about the psychology and strategy behind Thailand's tourist scams, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to finally settle the argument of who would win a battle between an elephant and a moose, but I'm still sorting out the import documents for huge, angry animals into Thailand.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 21 years ago. Fell in love with just nodding when I don't understand what someone is saying, and surprisingly, it's worked just fine.
Dude, that's a magic head nod. It works for everything in Thailand.
That's right.
You cut off someone in traffic. Sorry, just nod your head. Sorry. It's like the blanket forgivable thing.
Yeah, oddly, just pretending you know what's going on, it works most of the time.
With doing that and going,
Right.
Golden.
All right, we want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode almost every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. Due to Greg being in Canada right now, there actually won't be a bonus show this week, but we'll be back to our regular schedule next week. To learn how to become a patron, click the support button at the top of our website.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually recording. We're coming to you from the past. We recorded the show in advance. So
that is correct.
It's kind of spooky, but the magic of technology. Anyway, and as always, if you have something to say or a show idea or a joke or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button on the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we'll play on the show. All right. Well, in this episode, we are joined by a very cool young guy named, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, Ding Xu, who was suggested by our friend Graham, who listens to the show. Now, Ding's specialty is interesting. He is a PhD candidate in tourism at James Cook University in Australia and has authored several studies on tourist scams. His paper, Differentiating Tourist Scam Cases Towards a Taxonomy of Deceptive Schemes, won the Best PhD Paper Award of 2022 from his university. Now, of course, we all know, or I hope we all know, that tourist scams are very common in Thailand, but there's much more to them than people simply being gullible. So I called up Ding to give us the scholarly angle on this ubiquitous part of any trip to Thailand. And just a quick FYI, I chatted with Ding online and he was in Guangzhou. And he was in a tiled room, so the audio is a little bit echoey, but still fine to listen to, so just keep that in mind. So here is my conversation with my new friend and yours, Ding Xu. Well, I'm super happy to be talking to my brand new friend that I just made all the way from China. I'm talking about a young fella by the name of Ding Xu. Did I say that correctly at all?
Yes, Greg. Very much correct.
Well, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, now this interview came about because of a conversation I was having with some of our patrons on Discord. And we were looking for someone who could give us a little bit of extra insight into tourist scams, which are very prevalent in Thailand, as well as many other countries around the world, especially in Asia, I think. And we settled on this guy who was doing his PhD in tourism at James Cook University in Thailand. His name is, or in Australia, and his name was Ding. That's you. So I was just talking to you quickly before we started recording, and I said I've never known anyone to study this field to your level, to the doctorate level. So can you just give me a quick background of how you got there and why you chose to become a doctor in tourism studies, I guess it is?
So yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks again for having me. So first of all, my background, so I finished my bachelor degree in China, Then I moved to Australia to pursue my PhD. And all my background is in tourism. Like my bachelor is tourism management, and then my PhD is more of a general tourism focus. And the big reason that I do research on scamming is because one is that's something that I have personal experiences about.
Yeah.
I've been scammed. Frankly speaking, I've been scammed. And second, I think that's a quite prevalent thing across many, many countries. So there is a quite interesting website called Travel Scams. I don't know whether you know that.
I have seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I use their data in my research, and I found there are more than I think that's more than 150 countries or regions. People said that they've been scammed when they travel there.
Right.
How much percent of that of the world, like three quarters of the world, that people talking about scamming. So that was quite fun, I think, doing research about, and that's the big motivation for me, because I think that's an interesting topic, and nobody really done research on that.
It's fascinating. Yeah. So how are you going to apply this when you become a doctor and continue your post grad stuff? What is your eventual desire or goal?
That's a very interesting question, because at very first beginning, when I do my PhD, my vision or what I'm trying to achieve from these research is trying to help people to educate them to be a smart decision maker, to get to like avoid scamming. But by the end of my PhD journey, at this point of time, I believe that people will always be scammed.
Interesting.
It's really hard to get away from scams. But if for real, from a research or a manager's perspective, what we can achieve is try to reduce scammers, like try to pursue scammers, not to conduct scams. That's what we should focus next.
That's a really interesting thing, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it's what I wanted to get into next. It blows my mind that so many people still get scammed, because every website, guidebook, pamphlet, t-shirt, a book, everything written about traveling in countries where scams are prevalent says, hey, watch out for scams. Here they are. Here's how they work. Be careful. But it just doesn't stick. What's up?
That's a very good point. So it has several perspectives you can try to understand that. The very first one and the very most important one is because humans are lazy creatures. So cognitively, especially when we were exposed to a new, strange environment you don't have much information about, the strategy your brain adopts is to be trusty, like to trust whatever new information coming in, because that's how we mobilize our cognitive resources. Because, for example, when we try to judge something, whether it's true or false, we need to think hard. Like, is it related to something that I've experienced before, or is it related to some reading that I've read from like anti-scam guidebook, something like that? So that pulling your cognitive resources is effortful. So in most cases, humans are lazy creatures. We don't do that. But that guy told me that's the thing. Okay, I just trust him.
Right. So you default to what you're familiar with instead of like thinking through the difficult new concepts of like, oh, this new level of tourism scams that I just learned about. Like that's a lot of work. I'll just go back to trusting this guy because that's easier.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. So because that relates to a psychological concept that's called mindfulness and mindlessness. So mindfulness is the state that we allocate a lot of cognitive resources. We think hard. Sometimes we think hard, even we sweat. That's mindfulness. And mindlessness is just, I've known that. I know that. I just followed my routine and follow my default mode. And that's what happened.
Right. I think a lot of people, and now this, you and I chatted about this, a few weeks ago when we first set this up, but it's my contention as a non-PhD person arguing with a PhD, a doctor. So, I understand where this is probably going to go, but I think that the Land of Smiles campaign has been so insanely successful that people think that Thailand is full of absolutely trustworthy people who smile all the time and could never do anything dishonest, but that's not the case. There's assholes here, just like there is in any country. I think that's part of it. What do you think?
um, um, I think I agree with you that there
Oh, all
will
right.
always
Well, win
be
for me.
one win for you. So I think Thailand Tourism Board has done great with that campaign to establish a very positive, a very warm like destination image or personality for Thailand. And indeed, there are always scammers or other kinds of hustlers or something there. And the thing is that I don't really think we can blame that campaign for making people more gullible.
Okay.
What I found is that from my research, I won't go to too much detail into how I did my research, but what I found is that there will always be people who are gullible. There will always people who try to find some excitement when they're traveling aboard, and that really makes them put them in danger when facing scams. And it's just like my teaching experiences. So I've done some teaching when I was doing my PhD in Australia, and you'll be able to find that whatever how like whatever the way that I teach, or like I try to make the teaching content more intriguing, I try to be funny. There will always be two or three students. They never engage in the classroom. They never hand up their assignments. They never finish their homework, and that's the truth. Also, when we talk about scams, why there are always people um, they just continue to be scammed. That's because that's who they are. Their personality is somewhat decided.
That's very interesting, and it's a question of like you're not an expert in gems back home. Why are you suddenly looking at gems in Thailand? Like it just it doesn't make sense to me. But again, I'm looking at it as an outsider who's familiar with it and who understands it. But as a fresh faced tourist who might see this as like a cool opportunity on this exciting new dimension I'm exploring,
Yes,
maybe they just overlook that natural inclination to distrust.
and also the design of a scamming scheme that really like take you step by step into their what they want to achieve. Like they give you like there is a book called The Confidence Game that's talking about general about scamming and fraud. Basically, what it's trying to the key message from that book is that all like regardless of their design, all the scams and fraud they try to achieve is to use the desire, the human natural desire, and step by step take you to a deception.
Now, following on to that, you sent me a paper that you worked on. It was really really interesting, and my brain worked hard to keep up with it. But it was called "Differentiating Tourist Scam Cases Towards a Taxonomy of Deceptive Schemes,"
Yes.
and it was fascinating. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about in that paper, you said that tourist scams have three distinguishing features.
In fact, that's we got four distinct features from our analysis, and that's the first very important feature that we believe is we generally call deception type. So and all of these words that you've mentioned, whatever they are, most of them come from military research.
Mm,
So it's about how military people, how tanks can cover themselves, how people can camouflage themselves, well, like the military army person, when they're like walking in snows or in the jungles. That's the different ways they can camouflage themselves. So when we talk about positive and negative, or what we call simulation and dissimulation, deception. No, it's not really scamming. We're talking about deception.
yeah.
How can you deceive people? Um, so, for example, a positive one is giving people a fake phenomenon, giving people a fake coverage. But the negative deception is try to hide what is wrong, try to hide the truth. For example, if I today I should go to school tomorrow, I should finish my homework today. Then I found I can't finish them. So there are two ways that I can deceive my teacher. The first one, I hand out a finished homework of others. That's the positive strategy of deception. And the negative strategy is that The next day when I go to school, I tell my teacher, I've lost my homework book, so I can't hand it today. So that's the basic two ways to make scamming, or to make deception, sorry. And lots of scams are based on these two general types or a mixture.
So a positive one then in Thailand's, in regards to Thailand would be like, you want a 20 baht for a tuk-tuk tour all day. 20 baht, that's a huge deal. And then maybe a negative one would be like, ooh, yeah, that temple is closed today. Sorry.
Yeah, that could be. And also, like, I know there are fake policemen. People put there's some it's more of like blackmail. They suit up as a policeman. That happens a lot in Indonesia when people travel there, and they come on the street, and when they see people driving motorbikes, especially foreigners, they stop you and says, "I'm a policeman, and you violate some local laws, and I want to fine you," something like this. And that is pretty positive because they pretend themselves, they camouflage themselves as a policeman, which they are not.
I see. Okay. So there was four things. Was that the first one?
That's the first one. So the second one is what we call as interpersonal trust. It's the different levels whether interpersonal trust is involved in a scamming scheme. For example, so there are lots of scams relies on trusting people. And it happens a lot with retailing, happens a lot with, for example, services. Tuk-tuk is one, probably you just trust the tuk-tuk driver, and then, yeah, he looks nice, and then you trust him, just get on the tuk-tuk, and then you spend 3 hours going to different souvenir shops, or you pay more for the tuk-tuk tour.
Right.
There are also some scams doesn't really rely on interpersonal trust. For example, the ATM scam. So there are some very, not really prevalent scam, but it happens in some Europe country where they actually use sort of like a manipulated ATM machine. And when your card was inserted, you probably want to take out 2,000 euro. And the surcharge is, they manipulate the surcharges. So you might end up paying probably 500 euro for getting that money out. So that doesn't really rely on trust. You don't really have a component of trusting people, but you just got scammed.
Right. Okay. Number three,
that's also a very important, not interesting one. We call it as victim culpability or victim accountability. And that's a very distinguished feature that we believe about tourist scam compared to other kinds of scams. So let me explain the terminology here a bit. So culpability is a term from criminology or law research. It indicates the degree of one's blameworthiness in his wrongdoing.
Right, like their responsibility. They should have known better.
Yes. And also that happens a lot in tourist space, because lots of tourist scams started with some very touristic activities. Like, for example, not really bad example. An example, for example, people go to whorehouse. They try to get fun from it. But that whorehouse may have some people, as I said, like they pretend as fake policemen.
Sure.
They come in, they said you that's not thing, you need to pay a fine. And in that cases, people might feel like that these tourists might have some culpability on their wrongdoing. And the consequences of victim culpability is that it stops them from going to the real policeman to file a report.
Right, because they've been burned already.
Yeah, because they believe that they themselves is blameworthy if they go to report to the policeman, or that they're probably gonna step into trouble. And that also happens in whorehouse, in like street gambling, stuff like this.
Right, because you know that you were in the wrong already. Like you probably shouldn't be in those places. You probably shouldn't have been doing that thing, and you got caught. It's like the guy just last week in Florida who called the police because he suspected that his heroin was fake. So
that's a good one.
So they said, yeah, come on down. We'll check it for you. And they arrested him. Like you know that you're already doing something bad. So when you get called out, all you want to do is make it end. You don't want to keep it going. You don't want to go to the real police. You just want to get out.
Yep. And that will probably roll up into a bigger trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Okay, cool. And number 4?
And the fourth one, we call it prevalent. That's like whether a kind of scam is prevalent across geographical or history. Because when we're talking about prevalent scamming design, there are some scams can work better in Asia, some scams work better in Europe, in other continents, or in specific country, or in different provinces. I guess like in Thailand, like at different provinces, at different parts of Thailand, there are different more specific kinds of scamming design, and there are some more prevalent scamming design. So and that one is pretty hard to map, and that's also one of the things that we're still trying to do. So I can't give too much interpretation on that.
Interesting. Wow, that's really interesting. Man, it's incredible the amount of thought you put into dissecting all of the inner workings of these things, because it's easy to just think tourist scams are just a thing tricking people, but it's more complex than that.
Yeah, but it's also a fun process because it's the most enjoyable thing of doing research on scamming is to read different scamming stories. Then you'll be able to realize how stupid we are, how stupid all humans are.
Right. Brings everyone down to the same level, right?
Yeah.
So let's discuss a couple of the more common scams in Thailand then.
Yep.
The most popular one is probably you get into a taxi and they're like, "Oh yeah, my meter's broken." What's going on there?
And I mean, like for taxi scams, and that's a bit more talk about the taxonomy. So that is one of the reasons we try to come up with a taxonomy, because the traditionally or conventionally, when we're talking about scams, we always talk about taxi scams. We always talk about retail scams. It's always about the scenario.
Okay.
Right? It's always about where we are and in what context we got scammed. But actually, in one context, we can have multiple scams, right? We can have different types. Like when you're going to sit down in a taxi, that could be people, they don't use meters to charge you, they try to overcharge you. And there are other types like they detour you, even they use meters. So that's the reason why we try to come up with a taxonomy with a more focus of how they operate these features. So come back to what you've been talking about, the taxi scam. So from what I've known about Thailand, because that's another thing I need to tell your audience, is that my research were mostly done before the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And these pandemic can, to a large extent, change the tourism landscape. Probably they also change how some scams work. And what I'm telling you, the story is probably pre-2020.
I think it's fine.
Still funny.
I think it's fine because I think most of us want to kind of delete the last 2 years anyway. So let's just assume that we're still back then.
So the taxi not using meters. So that's a quite common scam across the globe, I guess.
Yeah.
If they identify you as a foreign visitors, they might try to set up some local rules to you. They said that, oh no, we don't use meters here, or my meter was broken. So if you take my taxi, we negotiate a price first, and then I just drive you there, and then I won't lie to you. You will be fine.
Right. You can trust me. I'm smiling. It's land of smiles.
Yeah. This is the land of smile.
Right. All right, let's move on to we touched on it quickly before with the gem dealers or the suit dealers, the suit scam. People get tricked into going in a store and then they fall for the hard sell, the high pressure sales tactics. Yes,
that happens a lot, and they have quite sophisticated selling technique or know-how. The first one that I found, from all of my interviews with different persons, the first one is how to display the product. And a lot of times you will see a product in their shop, really fancy, like the gems, they're really shining, they look real, super good. That might be, first, they're real, but what they are selling to you are fake.
Yeah, right.
Second, those things they display are fake, but they use some very good display design. They know how to put light on the germs, the fake germs, to make it more shiny. They put some oils on it, and they also put some colors on it to pretend they're good stones. But those ones that you got are not really those stuff.
Right.
That's the first, how they display things. And the second, that's quite important. I think that's probably one of the most important skills if you want to be a scammer. The next one that I'm talking about. About the audience, if you want to be a good scammer, listen to this. What we call it is called target shift development. So targetship is also a term from criminology. It indicates the capability of finding the easy and suitable target.
I see. Okay. So like finding your mark.
Yeah, finding your mark. Yes. So, for example, in selling germs, you're not going to sell them to young kids. You need to find like young couples or someone who is like in their mid age. They are firstly they got more money.
Yeah.
Second, they're more willing to spend money on different reasons. So that will have that. For example, if we think about that, when you are doing a scam, when you're doing that such a retailing scam, selling counterfeits, and a bunch of tourists coming in, by using the targetship development, you'll probably be able to filter out 50 or 60% people who have a very low possibility of buying stuff.
Right.
So knowing your whole market, knowing like who are more likely to fall into that scam is a very important know-how for scammers. I'm not teaching all the audience.
No. Our audience is very trustworthy, but it's a classic sales tactic, right? You got to identify your target audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think like jump out of the scamming context in a lot of retailing companies, they also do that, and they do that in a proper way. But in a scamming context, it's more pushy, and they have probably more aggressive selling technique. That's what I'm going to talk about next. That's the third one. It's about their communication skills. Sometimes in my research, I call them, in my thesis, I call them scammer artists.
Right.
Because they do know the art of communication. They do know how to catch someone's mind, trying to really step by step lead you into a scamming trap. They might give you something start small and then try to surprise you with something bigger. Like they might start like this price is like that, and then give you a big discount, and that would make a lot of people fall into that and think, oh, that's a good price, that's a good discount, regardless of thinking whether that price, like that thing really matched that price, whether that's is it really that valuable.
Right. It's understanding, the ebb and flow of what the consumer or the mark is willing to part with, whether it's a car lot or a gem store. When your customer is about to be like, nah, I'm not interested, I'm going to walk out, what do you say? What do you say to get them back?
Yes. Those communication arts. And also some quite important skills is about language. So in lots of more of a service context, for example, especially for foreign visitors, that the locals probably can be bilingual. They speak the local language. They also speak English to talk to you. And if you don't know their local language, that might put you in a disadvantaged position because they might communicating something to collaborate how to scam you and such and such. And that's something I've verified when I was talking to some industry people. And a very important skill for them in their operation to smooth their operation is to know a local language that the tourists, they cannot understand.
Right.
That helped them a lot.
And the last one I want to talk about, which is it's more of like a brute force scam. It's the pigeon food scam. Have you heard of this one?
Yes. And that's also, I think it's also quite prevalent across the globe because pigeon is kind of a bird that you can see everywhere and in lots of squares.
Right.
There are this kind of scams.
So let me just tell the audience in case they don't know. It's like you're walking along the street and some woman hands you a bag and says, feed the pigeons. And you're like, oh yeah, sure. Okay. And you throw some bird seed on the ground and a bunch of pigeons come down to get it. And then she goes, that's 1,000 baht. And you're like, what? Get out of here. I'm not paying 1,000 baht. And then suddenly you're surrounded by 5 or 6 big tough dudes who are like, yeah, that's 1,000 baht. You better pay it. It's
Yeah.
There's not a lot of finesse to it. It's just give us money or we'll pound you.
Yes. And that's also related to the team. As I did research, I realized that scams can more likely happen like an organization. They're really a team or a business of scamming. There are people who are in the front line, and then there are people who back up them.
Yeah.
That's the guys, if you reject, you say, no, I'm not going to pay. And that's the people who back them up. And there are also people who negotiate to government or to the police to provide some other level protection. And that relates to a very interesting study they did about whorehouse. They found the whorehouse in China, if they're closer to police station, they are less likely to be
Like raided?
yeah, it's less likely for them. So that's a very interesting thing. Like, so lots of these we call greed businesses, they did have a connection to some level about with governments or with police or with the law enforcement efforts. Back to the Pigeon one, and there is quite an interesting thing that I've just read. I think that's earlier this month, that the UK tourism board, they issued a warning to the UK tourists to Spain that they found there are some. They said it's a new kind of scam.
Ooh.
That people put bird poop on people's shirts, then ask for a service fee or steal things from people.
Wow.
But that's not new to me, because that was even picture that I have a friend who draw a comic about these type of scams that we've studied, and it's there like 3 or 4 years ago, and the UK tourism board, they just realized that's a new thing for them in 2022. Then I found it in 2019.
It's like a magic trick, right? Guys were doing it 100 years ago. It's just you have to repackage it and reframe it, and it's new again.
Yeah,
right?
just repackage it. Yes,
Yeah.
you're exactly right.
Well, what you said about teams is interesting, because years ago, it was actually the very first story that I wrote when I was a journalist, when I was working as a journalist in Thailand. And me and my buddy Scott, sometime co-host of the podcast here, he and I went down to Wat Saket, the Golden Mountain in Bangkok, on purpose to get scammed so we could write a story about it. And it was a really, really great day. We went down there and we had like our camera around our neck and the map upside down and looking at the map, and the tuk-tuk driver, like, just perfect. Hey, where are you going? Oh yeah, we're going to the Grand Palace. Oh yeah, that's closed today. And we were like, oh no, whatever are we going to do? And it was just the classic thing. So he said, oh, give me 20 baht and I'll take you on a tour. All you have to do is stop at a suit store later on. No, don't have to buy anything, but I get a gas coupon. So then we went to a temple, and then while we were in the temple, we randomly met this quote unquote stranger just by chance. And he worked at the United Nations. Oh, I work at the United Nations, and I get all my suits made at this one store. And oh, wow, what a coincidence. Our tuk-tuk driver, he was saying he was going to take us to a suit store. Maybe it's the same one. So we were being handed off from person to person to person. So then we went to the suit store, and when it became clear that we weren't interested, they got really surly and angry, and they so basically told us to leave. So then the tuk-tuk driver said, how about a gem store? And we were like, yeah, maybe we could buy some gems. Took us to a gem store. Same thing. When they realized we weren't going to buy anything, they basically asked us to leave. And then the tuk-tuk driver was like, one last stop. So we went to this lucky temple, and we came in, and there was this guy we call the Godfather. He was this big fat Thai guy with big rings on his fingers and no teeth. And he was like, yeah, there's a gem sale. Today's the last day of this gem sale. You should buy this stuff. And we were like, I don't know if I'm interested. And then he said, let me call my friend. So he whistled, and his friend came out, and it was this French guy, this white French guy. And he was really greasy looking, and he had big scars on his arms, I remember. And he was like, part of the team that was working us. And he said, he's like, yeah, I come to Thailand once a year, and this is the day I buy all of my gems and I take them back to France and I sell them at a 200% markup. And, finally we were like, no, we're fine. We're fine. And as we were leaving the temple, this Godfather guy started screaming at us, you're so stupid. You're so stupid. Why aren't you taking advantage of this great thing? And we're like, thank you. And we went outside back to our tuk-tuk, and the tuk-tuk had ditched us. He'd left. There was no one there. So it was the perfect end of the day. But you were right. I mean, we were probably being watched the whole time, and we were being worked by a large team of people who were working together.
Yes, absolutely. As you said, like you were handed from person to person, from different sides to new sides. And in that's actually a whole collaboration, the whole design of their plan. So like if the suit doesn't fit you, go to the gemstone. If the gemstone doesn't fit you, go to a temple. And if you're a religious person, you're probably going to believe that because that's in a temple, and you are meeting with some pretty senior guy, and whatever they told you, you're gonna believe it. It's a very classic, quite a long itinerary design for a scam. But that really happened not only in Thailand. I think mostly scams are like this kind of a long itinerary scam happen in Southeast Asia.
Interesting. So as we're wrapping up here, then do you just see the same stuff over and over and over again in terms of scams? Like, imagine if it was a legitimate industry. Are there any cool new angles or developments or strategies that are emerging? Is there anything new in the world of tourist scams?
I can't that's the tricky thing for me, because I think scam evolves so quick. And there's another interesting piece about my research is that I found, so there is some research done in general scams. They have summarized different scamming skills that it worked probably 10, 15 years ago, and I retested them in a tourism context in an experiment. And I found actually the general population, most people are capable of identifying that's a scam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have several groups of treatment. The first one, I tell people that we're selling souvenirs and something, something, something. Then the second one, we tell people we're selling souvenirs, something, something, and give you a discount today. Then third one is that we have a peer tourist to come to say, yeah, I bought it. It's good. It's just like the French guy you met that day.
Right.
To do the same thing. And people's reaction is that they are less likely to buy in the discount and in the peer pressure scenario. They're actually more likely to buy if you don't present any scamming skills.
Really?
Yeah, that's very interesting from my side. It's totally different from other research.
Wow.
That's as you said, like a lot of people read different guidebook about scamming and stuff. They know quite a lot of these stories. But back to what I said at early beginning, there are always bad students in your class.
Right.
There are always stupid guys in a tour. So there are still people saying yes. But as you speak about the new evolved things, I think all these old skills, they will not really fade away, but they will be repacked. They will be stood up as a new coverage, a new story, a new camouflage. The really easy principles of conducting a scam is to deceive people, is to use the trait, that the human trait, the natural human trait that we are lazy.
Right. So, I mean, trust, deception, laziness, gullibility, those are part of our species. Those are not going away.
Yeah,
And so
it's not going to go away.
as long as they're there, there's always going to be scams.
Yes.
Positive note. All right. Well, so as we're ending then, I mean, what can we do to educate people? I mean, just, what I always say to people is, who come here and they have a hard time believing that there's so many scams. I'm like, when you go back home, do you stand on the street corner in a nice shirt and just, help people for free for no reason? No, you don't. And neither do Thais unless they're going to get money out of it. So like, how do we educate people? What do we say?
I think that's something that I'm trying to put efforts, try to make my research have some practical value, to design some package, but I can't really find a better way, because scammers, they really did well in communication. I can't really beat them for real. From bottom of my heart, it's hard for me to say, yeah, I can do better than scammers. But I think what I can do is we identify people who have some personalities that they might be more gullible. That's where we should focus on. That's the people that we try to feed more information to.
Mm-hmm.
We may be able to identify their consumption pattern from like using big data, and to just feed them from time to time in social media with some messages, and also about some different tourism markets. For example, backpackers. Backpackers are people who try to seek some adventurous, exciting experiences when they're traveling alone abroad, and that's the sort of thing, that sort of group of people that really fit into the gullibility part.
Right.
And we might be able to find a way to communicate with them, with their community, to like the motel that they stay, and their online communities, to tell them more about scamming. And another thing is try to keep pushing people. don't be overconfident.
It's education, man. It all comes down to education.
Just about talking, and talking.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Ding, that was really interesting, man. I really like this sort of like extra angle and extra layer that you bring to this conversation, because it's not as simple as just tricking a guy. It's a lot of psychology. It's a lot of, taking advantage of people's weaknesses that are just naturally there as humans. So there's a lot to talk about, and it's cool. So listeners, if you know someone who's coming to Thailand, make sure to warn them about the scams, because like we said, even if they read the warnings, they might still fall for the scams, because a lot of people do, because we just have that trusting or gullible nature within us.
Yes.
All right, Ding. Thank you very much, sir. It's great to meet you and talk to you. And if people want to find out more about you or read your research, can they check you out anywhere?
Yeah, I think if they Google my name on ResearchGate, they're probably going to find my contact. I have my emails on that. I have my research on that. And feel free just to pump up with any questions. Or even though you are a scammer, you try to perfect your skills, you can still talk to me. I'll try to help you with your career.
He's a doctor. You could trust him. Thanks very much, Ding. You take care.
Thanks, Greg.
Dude, I love this interview. I love this topic. I think you and I have talked a lot about various tourist scams over the years. And like, as he pointed out, they're amazingly durable. Like, they just don't go away.
Right. And that's what Ding was talking about, right? Like, as long as the human mind works the way it does, there will always be people to take advantage of these little like ways around the logic. So it's fascinating. And it's something that, that's what I opened the interview with, right? Like, these warnings about tourist scams are in every piece of literature ever written on Thailand, but people still fall for them. And when I was doing the interview, as I was saying that sentence and setting up the question, you couldn't see it obviously, but Ding on the camera was nodding aggressively, like, I know.
Well, I really would like our listeners to be better informed than the average people. So I know a lot of our listeners are expats as opposed to tourists, but I feel like our listeners are really going out of their way to educate themselves. So I feel like it's our duty to teach our listeners how to avoid these scams. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. We should do like maybe a special video series or something. Maybe if, next time Ding comes through town, we'll team up with him. We'll pound the pavement and hit the streets and go down to sort of point out some tourist scams and some common areas and things to watch out for.
Yeah, I really want to do that. It's a frustrating thing. I've actually had the experience. To me, the simplest and most basic scam is just when a taxi driver, instead of using the meter, will quote a price. So to me, this is the simplest thing. And so all my friends and family who come visit Thailand, I tell them, never go off meter. It's a general rule. Always go by the meter. Here's the annoying thing. Even though I tell them that, and they're very well informed, some of them, they just, they sit down in the taxi. The guy says 300 baht. In their head, they're thinking, oh shit, that's only $10. And they're already in the taxi. They don't want to be rude. And so they end up just paying anyway. Like, even though they actually already know that they shouldn't do that, they're just whatever, let's just do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's one of the conditions that these guys will always take advantage of. And I'm guilty of it too. There are some times when, like, if it's raining, like I'll open a taxi and I'll be like, the guy will quote me an exorbitant price, and I'll be like, well, that's worth it right now. Basically, and it always comes down to, will I pay X to avoid the problem of Y? So will I pay 300 baht to avoid the problem of getting back out of the taxi and flagging down another one that might be the same rigmarole? Like, for a lot of people, the answer is yes. So there's always these caveats.
No, I agree. I mean, if it's raining or if there's some special cases, I agree. But I really wish all visitors, be they expats or tourists or re-tourists, I really think they would always go by the meter. It's one of those things where you don't want the market price to go up. And so it's like every time someone agrees to go off meter, it just encourages taxi drivers to go off meter. Whereas if everyone just said meter, if everyone just said that, then we would never have to deal with it. But anyway, let's do a future show. We'll have to work it out. I feel that Bangkok podcast listeners, they're a cut above the rest, Greg. They're not the average person coming to Thailand.
No, our listeners are, the creme de la creme, as they say. The kids are using that term these days.
They're the exception. So in the future, we will, the bottom line is I think we've already informed them of several different types of scams, but I think we should do a formal show on it. Let's do it.
I agree. We'll come back to it later. Yeah. So many thanks to Ding for coming on the show. And man, I hope to see you again. And next time you're in Thailand, let us know, because we had a great conversation and it would be fun to hang out in person.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ding.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. Now, last time Ed asked me what I thought about people using the speakers on their phones, so this week it is my turn. Now, Ed, this is a pretty simple one. I think all of us have experienced it at one point or another. But what's your take on basically having one or more jingjokes in your kitchen, the little lizards?
Gotcha. This is very common to have little lizards around. It's never bothered me at all. Like, I know for some people, they're bothered by little lizards the way most people are bothered by cockroaches. Like,
right.
Even though I don't even know what cockroaches do, but they look so creepy and they're so big that whenever I see a cockroach, I just feel like I got to take care of that. I can't let that go. You know?
They're just, talk about judging a book by its cover, right? Like, I didn't even get to know the guy, but I'm like, you're just so ugly, I need to kill you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're just too big and too ugly. I got to kill you. But it's funny, the little, obviously like a big lizard, I would think like, okay, shit, I got to do something about this. But yeah, like the tiny lizards, and again, I'm not an expert on them. Presumably they eat mosquitoes or ants, and I've got ants and I've got mosquitoes. So I generally look at them as a good thing. I definitely don't look at them as cockroaches. But it's funny because in the past, I have had Thai girlfriends who were really bothered by them. Like they just kind of freaked out as if it was a cockroach. You know, so I get that there's people who don't like them, but it's not me. So I guess I'm a live with. I mean, in a way, I'm kind of leaning towards love in the sense that I think they do good stuff, don't they? I mean, do they eat ants and mosquitoes?
Yeah, totally. I'm a hard love on them. First of all, I think they're super cute. I mean, I like snakes and reptiles anyway. I used to have a pet snake in Canada. So I think they're super cute, and I catch them when I can, and I hold them in my hands, and I look at them. I think they're cute. So I'm a hard love on this. I've seen many of them in the kitchen, and my wife and I call them Bob whenever we see one. Oh, I saw Bob today. He ran under the fridge or something.
Oh, that's great. That's funny.
Yeah. So I'm a big love. I think they're great and they're beneficial. What I don't like is the little sticky pieces of poop they leave like high on the walls when they're climbing around. But
yeah, they do. They do poop. That everything's got a downside. They do poop. But I'm kind of with you. I wouldn't say I'm a hard love, but it's weird that some people look at them similar to like cockroaches or snakes or something. I was out for lunch with some friends the other day, and one of the people there was my Thai friend, and I picked up a lid on a little jar that was about 3 feet away from the table, and I said, "Oh, there's a jingjok down here," and she literally got up on her chair, like she's terrified of them. She hates them, and yes,
some people just have that visceral reaction.
Yeah, I have encountered that. I know what you're talking about. But I'm with you on this. I'm a mild love. I guess you're a hard love. But I guess it's I guess the Bangkok podcast is pro jingjok.
A pro jingjok. That's a double love from the Bangkok podcast.
That's so funny. Alrighty. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, baby. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. Send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy out there, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure.
Guys, I'm editing this in Canada. I'm at my friend's condo right now and he's sleeping on the sofa next to me. It's almost 1 a.m. and it's -4 degrees. I think I might die from this cold. I gotta go to bed and get under the covers.